And thank you very much for everyone coming. As you will have learned from the introduction, my background is not art history. I'm an archivist and a historian, so I'm going to talk more about Foley's statues in the College of Physicians of Ireland in the context of my PhD research, which is looking at the creation of professional identity by the college and its members in the mid-19th century. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of historical background on the college itself, because this is quite important to understand where the college was positioned in the 1860s when they started commissioning these statues. And then I'm going to look at how and why the statues were commissioned, and why Foley was chosen as the artist, and how the college received them when they were unveiled. So the College of Physicians was founded in 1654 by John Stern, who was the first professor of medicine in Trinity College. He founded a fraternity of physicians within Trinity with the aim of improving the teaching of medicine. In 1667, the fraternity was granted a royal charter, which established it as a College of Physicians, and a second royal charter was granted in 1692, which changed the name to the King and Queen's College of Physicians of Ireland. Two aspects of the 1692 charter are important for this paper. Firstly, the charter granted the college the authority to licence all of those who wished to practice medicine on the island of Ireland. However, the necessary parliamentary legislation to enforce this regulation was never passed, which, as a result, that most medics didn't apply for the licence because they didn't have to hold it. And then secondly, the charter made the College of Physicians an independent organisation and broke the link with Trinity College, which meant the College of Physicians had to move out of the building that they had in Trinity, but they didn't move in anywhere else, so they were essentially homeless for the next 150 years. And because of these two factors, throughout the 18th and into the early decades of the 19th century, the College of Physicians remained a fairly small elite membership group with very little money and no building, meaning that the meetings, when they were held in the houses of the fellows in Dublin or in the hospitals. Sorry, I forgot, here's our charter. So this position changed in 1858 with the passing of the Medical Act. The Medical Act regulated the medical profession for the first time across Britain and Ireland. The Act established the General Council of Medical Education and Registration, which oversaw the registration of doctors, and under the Act, 17 licensing bodies were prescribed as, if you held a licence from one of these 17 bodies, you could join the medical register, and the College of Physicians was one of those 17 bodies. The following year, stamp duty on the college's certificates was remitted, meaning that the college's licentiate, which had cost £30, reduced to £10, 10 shillings and 10 pence, making it, for the first time, a registrable qualification at a reasonable fee. The impact on the college's finances was immediate. So within the 8 years prior to the passing of the Medical Act, on average, the college's exams brought in an income of about £300 a year. In the 10 years after the passing of the 1858 Medical Act, the income from exams had increased fivefold, and the college was getting nearly £1,500 a year from the exams. So it was a huge increase in income, and the exams were always the main income for the college. At the same time, the status of the medical profession within Ireland was increasing. As historian Greta Jones has shown, by the mid-19th century, medical practice had the potential to offer a good standard of income within 10 years of graduation. Medical schools estimated that students could aim to reach an annual income of between £500 and £1,000 a year, with, quote, the substantial proofs of the material prosperity that families and homes present. So medicine was becoming an increasingly respectable and lucrative profession, especially for middle-class families in ascent, and the removal of the religious bar meant that it was open to Protestants and Catholics. As a result, by the middle of the 19th century, medical men were taking on an increasingly important role in civic life in Dublin. And I think David Dixon, in his History of Dublin, suggests that by between 1830 and 1880, Dublin was in a period with the ascendancy of medicine, and that medics were prominent in all aspects of civic life. So it's against this background of an increasingly wealthy and prominent medical profession that in the 1860s, the College of Physicians agreed to purchase the old home of the Kildare Street Club at 5 and 6 Kildare Street for a sum of £5,000. The Kildare Street Club had just built their new building at the bottom of the street that's now Alliance Française, and were about to move out. The college raised the capital needed by asking its licentiate and fellows to purchase debentures of £50 at 4% interest, confident that with the new income they had coming from fees, they would be able to pay off this money. In November 1860, a few months after the purchase, the college owned the building, the club was still in possession. There was a fire on the site. The main building at the front of the site was completely destroyed, although a small racket court at the back survived. And the college, as the owners, received the insurance money. and found themselves in the unexpected position of owning a city centre site and having a large pot of money to design a building for themselves. They were a little bit perplexed by this, as they hadn't expected to have to design something. They didn't really know how to go about it. In the end, they set up a building committee and commissioned 6 architects to submit designs on a very specific specification. And the design submitted by William Murray Jr. was judged, quote, the best and most suitable for the purposes of the college. And this is his design for the facade that was published in the Dublin Builder. Building work commenced at the beginning of 1861. The college hoped to move in by 1863. It took slightly longer than expected, and it was the middle of 1864 before they got in. But I feel 3 years to build this building is pretty impressive, particularly looking at the Children's Hospital. So the largest space within this new building was described by the college either as a college hall or convocation hall. And this is, again, from the Dublin Builder. So this was Murray's design. It doesn't look quite like this, but it's pretty similar. And the Dublin Builder describes it as, quote, a noble apartment 58 feet by 30 feet and 30 feet high, divided into 5 bays in length and 3 in breadth by Corinthian pilasters elevated over a panelled dado and surmounted by the ornamental frieze and cornice. So this is the lithograph, I say, that was printed at the time, and although, sorry, I've cut it off on the bottom, but it's actually labelled as the examination hall of the college, although in the picture it's presented as kind of a public gallery space. These guys don't look like they're about to sit their exams. And fairly fashionably dressed ladies and gentlemen are looking at portraits on the wall. Particularly interesting, as the college didn't actually own any paintings at this time, so even if they'd wanted a gallery space, they would have had nothing to put in it. And you'll also see that there's no sign of the statues in the room, so they obviously hadn't planned them from the beginning. So the building opened in the summer of 1864, and the same year, the first of the statues were commissioned from Foley. And the subject is Sir Henry Marsh, 1790 to 1860, so he died 4 years previously. Marsh was a leading member of what became known as the Dublin School of Clinicians who were working in the middle decades of the 19th century. He founded in his back garden what would become the National Children's Hospital and was physician to Queen Victoria in Ireland and was knighted for his services to medicine. And he'd served as president of the College of Physicians on 3 occasions. So his statue was unveiled on the 9th of November 1866, so it took 2 years, in Kildare Street, and the event was recorded in a special publication commissioned by the college, which includes records of all the speeches that were given on the event and also a photograph of the statue. So there's quite a long description of Marsh in the statue in there, which I'm going to read a bit from. So, acting on the impression that prominent among the leading characteristics of Sir Henry Marsh, it might actually be on to the statue. So, acting on the impression that prominent among the leading characteristics of Sir Henry Marsh were an astute, penetrative intelligence, rapid discrimination, power of logical argument, precision, and a winning address, the sculptor has selected an action and an expression which, whilst realising the physique of the original, also embodies suggestions of the deeper import. The work, as a portrait statue, is in the highest degree felicitous. And the figure is represented standing, the left leg being slightly advanced, the arm and hand of the same size sustaining the college cap. The right hand is raised as though urging, by a demonstrative gesture, a listener to conviction on some point of opinion, with a half-suppressed smile, from confidence in the soundness of his own views, lights up the countenance. In addition to the ordinary costume of the time, Sir Henry Marsh is attired in the president's robes, which, while serving to identify him with an office he held with so much dignity and honour, tends by the size and disposition of its folds to enrich the otherwise meagre outlines and effects of modern dress. And the president's robes were never full length, they were considerably shorter, so they've definitely been lengthened to make the statue work better. Unfortunately, there's no records in the college minutes of why they chose Foley as an artist for this commission, but if we look at some of the other artworks that were being commissioned by the college at the time, it's clear that they had a strong preference for supporting Irish artists and artistry. This can be seen in the portraits commissioned from the 1860s onwards, which include the leading Irish society artist Alfred Jones and both Castle Smiths, but especially in the commissioning of the college's silver mace in 1850. So the mace was designed by Sir Frederick William Burton and was made by West from Irish silver, and the college were very keen throughout that the design was to be, quote, the design was, quote, a very suitable and elegant design from Mr. Burton, characteristic of the profession and of Ireland. So William Stokes, who was the president who oversaw the commissioning of the mace, was a close friend of Burton, and they were part of a group who were interested in Irish art, antiquities, and archaeology, who often met in Stokes' house to discuss these. So it's clear that Burton and Stokes drew on their shared interest in Irish antiquities in the design. So these are some of Burton's designs for the mace, which are in the National Gallery. I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong. They're using, the technique Nielio, a technique composing an amalgamation of silver and sulfur, which produces the design at the bottom of the mace in the circle, and is associated with Celtic art. And then the Ireland is represented in the use of the shamrock, which you can see in the small designs here, but it's placed with the rose and the thistle, so Ireland is being very clearly placed as part of the United Kingdom of Britain and Ireland, not on its own. And then the medical profession is represented at the head of the mace. There's 3 figures of kind of leading figures from the history of medicine. Stokes made it very clear in his address to the Royal Irish Academy, the year he was president in 1874, that he saw a real importance in supporting Ireland and its art and medicine, and that he saw the two going together, and that Ireland would be improved socially and culturally through the development of science and arts, which would help to raise the position of the country. And I think this is why the college is so keen on commissioning Irish artists, and I presume that's why they chose Foley as the sculptor. So using Foley was, as I say, one of the leading Irish artists of the day, would promote Irish artistry and celebration of the leaders of the profession in marble, would promote the Irish medical profession. In her study of the portrait collections in the Royal College of Physicians in London, Ludmilla Jordanova reflects on the motivating factors for institutions to collect and commission works, and she says that they can be used to create a visual identity, which is what I've been looking at, celebrating achievements and then reinforcing a kind of institutional identity. And in 1866, William Stokes gave an address at the unveiling of the statue of Marsh, and in it he touches on many of the factors, and this is where I've taken the quote from, the title from. So, it must be gratifying to this college to see this noble hall in which we are now assembled become, as it were, the Irish Medical Walhalla, where will be preserved the memorials which, though dead, yet speak of the true soldiers of medicine whose work lived on after them and whose ways were worthy. In the speech, Stokes continues, and he directly links the College of Physicians in Ireland in the footsteps of the London College, who, he says, celebrate the noble fathers of British medicine, and it's now time for the Irish College to celebrate the key leaders of Irish medicine. I presume he means including himself, and he does later get a statue. Stokes also talks about the importance of public works, and something which he believed Dublin was deficient in, and that institutions with the aspirations of the College of Physicians should go out of their way to create this kind of public art. That Stokes was not alone in supporting this view is clear from the amount of money the college raised from subscribers for this and other commissions. So in the little book about Marsh's statue, it lists everybody who contributed to the statue. It cost £800, and there's 345 names who contributed, and they come from medical, legal, military, and the clerical professions. There's several members of the aristocracy, as well as female subscribers, and the smallest contribution at the very end of the list is described as a widow's mite. So the works were more than just private memorials raised by the profession. They were public recognitions, I think, of the medical profession and its members. So before the statue of Marsh was unveiled, the college had already commissioned a second work from Foley. So in November 1864, the minutes of the college record that subscriptions were to be raised from the fellows for a bust of Sir Dominic Corrigan, who had just finished a 5-year term as president, and was largely credited as being the driving force behind getting the College of Physicians into their building on Kildare Street. Within a month, the college found that, quote, many persons outside the college, both professional and non-professional, have communicated their desire to subscribe to the testimonial to Dominic Corrigan, and as a result, we have a far larger sum than is required for the bust. So they went for another full-length statue. So Corrigan, like Marsh, was a leading figure in the medical Dublin of his day. Although he was being celebrated by the college at this point in his career, the relationship had not always been so easy. Corrigan was part of the rising middle class of medicine in Dublin. His father had been a small-scale farmer and hardware dealer in Kilmainham. Corrigan was educated as a lay student in Maynooth, where his aptitude for medicine was noticed by the local practitioner, who encouraged him to study medicine, and he eventually went to Edinburgh. He returned to Dublin, took up practice, which eventually brought him to the centre of Merrion Square, the Centre of Medicine at Merrion Square, and I have his account books in the archive. So he was making between £4,000 and £6,000 a year, and the year the college bought 6 Kildare Street, Corrigan made more on his own in private practice than the building cost, so he was doing extremely well. Because Corrigan was Catholic, he hadn't gone to Trinity College, and because he hadn't gone to Trinity College, he didn't have a licentiate of the College of Physicians, so he couldn't become a fellow. Very complicated. But in 1874, he applied for honorary fellowship of the college, which he was allowed to apply for, but his application was blackballed. This was largely due to a professional dispute over the management of the Central Board of Health during the Irish famine. But his biographer, Owen O'Brien, says that there was almost certainly sectarian influence. Indeed, that the college's history is such that, in this regard, that it would be difficult not to sustain this viewpoint. So Corrigan sidestepped this problem by presenting himself a few years later to sit the licentiate exam of the college. So the licentiate exam you sat when you graduated from medical school, he was already fairly well on in his profession, and he actually sat the exam with several of his own medical students, and the college couldn't refuse him. So he turned up, he passed the exam, and was made a fellow within 3 weeks. And then in 1859, he became the first Catholic president of the college. So despite this rocky start, Corrigan would become one of the strongest advocates for the college and its public role, and particularly increasing its prestige. As I said, he was active in the campaign for a new building, and he donated much of his own money. He was a liberal subscriber to many of the artistic commissions carried out by the college. And like Stokes, he believed in an Irish identity within a wider United Kingdom, and one in which, I think probably importantly for him, religion should not play a part. He said, "Among the bonds that unite the three divisions of our kingdom together, there are none stronger than those of our profession, soaring in its exercise above all sectarian discords. We know no difference of race or creed or colour, for every man is our neighbour." Corrigan was certainly prepared to stand on the dignity of his profession. It's possibly just, well, the Lord Mayor isn't here. But in February 1862, he left an inaugural banquet held by the Lord Mayor of Dublin when, as president of the college, he was not given a seat at the top table, according, quote, to usual custom. And there were some extremely tense letters written between the two organisations over who was right over this. It's not quite clear if Corrigan reacted so strongly to this perceived slight because of his background and his religion, but I think it may well have been a factor in why he reacted quite so strongly to it. Corrigan's statue took longer than Marsh's to complete, and the third commission from the college to Foley would take even longer. As Paula has pointed out in her books, Foley was taking on a lot of commissions at this time, and, quote, coupled with his diligence and slow progress, this resulted in the delay to the completion of many works. So while the statue of Marsh was unveiled in 1866, 2 years after it was commissioned, 4 years after the commissioning of the statue of Stokes in 1869, Foley was only able to report that, and we have the letter in the archive, the full-size model for the statue of Dr. Stokes is, I'm glad to say, in progress and far advanced. But when the statue itself will be ready for erection in the college, I cannot at present say. So we have the model of the Stokes statue in the college's collections, which allows the comparison with the full-size one that did eventually turn up. The art historian Art Cruikshanks has suggested that the works don't work quite as well on the smaller scale as they do on the larger one, and she says that the statues have emphasised the grandeur so that they may be carried across the mass of the building behind them, and that this grand scale doesn't work quite so well on the smaller versions, which I think is probably a fair point. He said it looks a lot fuller in his bigger statue. Those of you who are coming on the walking tour tomorrow will get the statuette, the small one, out as well, so you can see them. We've also redecorated the building since these photographs were taken, so the colours behind the statues are much brighter now, and it really does make them stand out a lot more than they somewhat fade into the background in these. So this statue of Stokes would not be unveiled until 1876, 2 years after Foley's death, and it is possible that much of the work was completed by Foley's principal assistant, Thomas Brooke, who was named in his will as one of the 3 sculptors to continue his work. The result was considered worth the wait, and all 3 Foley statues were celebrated by the college as, quote, magnificent works of art from the one studio, designed not merely as likenesses of the men and indications of their expressions, but as emblematic of character in the abstract. Activity, power, and deep reflection are here symbolized in the sculptor's hands in imperishable marble. Although not by Foley, I do want to finish with the final statue in our collection, just so he doesn't feel left out. Robert Graves, which was completed after Foley's untimely death. I presume the college would have eventually commissioned the 4th one from him. This was commissioned from Foley's former pupil, Alfred Bruce Joyce. Coincidentally, Alfred's father was a fellow of the college, which may have been why he got the job. And it's the final one in the 4 of the statues. So I hope that this has shown the 3 Foley statues in the college were created as part of a concerted effort by the college to present a public view of the medical profession at a time when medicine was doing extremely well. They were able to do this through the increased wealth and social prestige of the profession at the time, which allowed them to attempt things on a much greater scale than they'd been able to before, not just the building, but the artworks. The fellows who commissioned the statues were active, as Dixon has pointed out, in all aspects of civic life, and believed in using their wealth and influence to patronise and promote Irish artistry. The statues, as well as other artworks commissioned by the college, reflect this in their use of Irish art, Irish materials, and Irish symbolism. Perhaps most importantly for the college, they promoted the Irish and especially the Dublin medical profession, placing it on a footing equal to that of Britain. This was a benefit to the profession as a whole, but could also benefit the individual as well. At the unveiling of the statue of Sir Henry Marsh, 3 fellows of the college gave speeches: William Stokes, Sir Dominic Corrigan, and John Thomas Banks. All 3 would be recognised with subscription-commissioned artworks by the college within the next 10 years. Stokes and Corrigan with statues, and Banks had a portrait by Sarah Purser. All these artworks are now hanging in the same hall in the college, forming part of what Stokes had described as the Irish Medical Walhalla. So in her introduction to the study of Irish medical portraiture, Anne Cruikshanks comments that, quote, "The portraits, outside their artistic value, proved to be a remarkable social document, giving insight into the attitudes to doctors throughout the centuries, reaching a peak of magisterial grandeur in the mid-19th century, when consultants' portraits show them as the leaders, almost the gods of society, equal in their magnificence of their portrayal with the images of aristocracy." Thank you.